I know you're out there. I can feel you there. I came here to show you how it's gonna be. Our world is changing. Let me be me. I am gonna show you a world where we all free, freedom.
Hi, I'm Judy, a mother of an Indigo child, and I wish you all a very warm welcome to Indigo, the symbol of hope. My aim with this videotape is to make you all aware of the global group of parents and children all on a similar quest in finding more information, understanding and support into the phenomena of Indigo children. Our children, or our new generation of children, are here for such a great purpose, and often having the truth out in the open is the starting point of an easier, more self-accepting life journey. I hope that you will find this message of hope informative, supportive and inspiring. The reason for the title of the video is that I wanted to share with you the sense of hope the moment that we start looking for more information and understanding into our own children and what we are dealing with on a daily basis. Being a mother of an Indigo child, I was told that my son is uniquely different, highly intuitive and very spiritual. I think the most beautiful message the counselor gave us was the fact that we're not alone, that there are many parents and children whom are experiencing exactly the same situations as we are, and we decided after that to live our lives with purpose and reason. However, I have found being a mother, tomorrow I still have to discipline and nurture my child, and my son Sean still has to go back to school where he often feels lonely, isolated and small in his world. When my son turned 6, he mentioned to me that he is different to other boys. The reason he gave me was that if he needed to fight with his fists and swear in order to be a man, he doesn't want to be one. As a mother, I could not tell my son that he was wrong. However, I did realize that our life together would be based or challenged on very different values and principles compared to other parents and children. When Sean turned 14 last year, I wanted to give him a birthday party, and he didn't want one, and the reason he gave me was that he was concerned and almost scared that no one would come. Now, it broke my heart as a mother to realize that my son does not have two people that he trusts enough in order to be there for him on his birthday. I was then introduced to the Indigo Children book written by Lee Carroll and Jan Tober, and a second book that is also available currently on Indigo Children is The Care and Feeding of Indigo Children, written by Doreen Virtue. Finding my child within these books, the relief was absolutely tremendous. And I realized during this time that I would very much like to do more research in finding truly what it is that we're dealing with concerning Indigo children. I launched a website in 2001 for research purposes only. I was looking for other parents and most profoundly other children whom are experiencing similar situations of isolation and discomfort within the home. The response has been absolutely tremendous from all over the world, and I thank you all for your loving input. Most of the completed questionnaires requested more information and support for both parents and children. Now, being South African based created quite a challenge in finding different alternatives to offer support worldwide. That was the reason why I decided to do this videotape, not only to make you aware of the phenomena of indigo children, but also to offer you a sense of belonging to this global group of parents and children. During this period, I did a lot of research on indigo children, new and old generational issues, universal law, astrology, religion, spirituality. I was just looking for more information and what it was that I'm dealing with. Whether we label our children as indigo children, crystal children, or millennium children, our new generation of children are here to move us from an era of reasoning, in other words, having to factually or scientifically prove everything before we would incorporate it into our lives, into an era of enlightenment. For each individual that feels lonely, isolated and small within their world, the greatest gift we can give them is understanding, support and the empowerment to be the most that they can be as a human being. I invite each one of you to open your hearts and minds to a different way of looking at our new generation or into the phenomena of indigo children. The term indigo children is based on a metaphysical concept of color. All living matter has an electromagnetic field that surrounds it, but we're going to concentrate just for a moment on the electromagnetic field that surrounds the human, called the human auric field. Because there's few of us who can actually visually see this capsule of energy around us, we perceive it to be non-existent. However, we do have a sense of our own personal space. Therefore, the saying, "Don't invade my space." In the mid-1970s, a lady called Nancy Ann Tate did profound research on the colors in the human aura and how they possibly affect us on a daily basis. During this period, she started seeing young children that presented a new dark blue color in the aura, and she called it indigo. Now, she was basically the first person to see this new color in the aura, and after that, Jan Tober and Lee Carroll actually wrote their book on indigo children. These are the 10 most common traits and characteristics observed by Lee Carroll and Jan Tober. They come into the world with a feeling of royalty and act like one. They have a feeling of deserving to be here and are surprised when others don't share that. Self-worth is not a big issue. They often tell the parents who they are. They have difficulty with absolute authority without explanation or choice. They simply will not do certain things. For example, waiting in a line is difficult for them sometimes. They get frustrated with systems that are ritual-orientated and don't require creative thought. They often see better ways of doing things both at home and in school, which makes them sometimes seem like system busters or nonconformists. They seem antisocial unless they are with their own kind, and if there are no others of like consciousness, they often turn inward, feeling like no other human understands them. School is therefore often extremely difficult for them socially. They will not respond to guilt discipline, and they are not shy in letting you know what they need. Doreen Virtue documented the following traits and characteristics. They are strong-willed. They're born in 1978 or later. They are headstrong. They are creative and prone to addictions. They are an old soul, as if they're 13 going on 43. They are intuitive or psychic, possibly with a history of seeing angels or deceased people. An isolationist, either through aggressive acting out or through fragile introversion. They are independent and proud. They possess a deep desire to help the world in a big way. They waver between low self-esteem and grandiosity. They bore easily. They have probably been diagnosed as having ADD or ADHD, which is attention deficit disorder or hyperactivity disorder. They are prone to insomnia, restless sleep, nightmares, or difficulty or a fear of falling asleep. They have a history of depression or even suicidal thoughts or attempts. They look for deep, real, lasting friendships, and they bond easily with plants and animals. It is very difficult to say when a generation begins and ends. Therefore, we might find that a lot of adults can relate to these common traits and characteristics as well. And maybe our role as adults is to assist the new generation in all the difficulties and issues, and to pave the way for the larger group that is to follow. Many difficulties are specific to the individual. So the best way to help yourself as well as your child is to start your own journey of research, as well as opening your mind to alternative solutions to your everyday challenges. We have called on a few specialists in the fields of brain dominance, nutrition, education, as well as holistic healing to offer more insight and workable tools for your day-to-day life. Adrian Stevens is a physiotherapist that is not only treating his patients on a physical level, but incorporates the mental as well as the spiritual side to the being into his practice. He also discusses how color affects us and our emotional well-being on a day-to-day basis.
For me, physiotherapy was a very exciting future for me. It was what I wanted to do, to work with people. But already at university, I came to the realization that there's more to us than just the structure, the physical side of what we see. Looking through various different healing techniques from acupuncture, I arrived at kinesiology eventually. And why kinesiology was fascinating for me was it looked at us as a whole person. If you could imagine a triangle, and you could imagine the base of that triangle being the structural side of us, the bones, the ligaments, the joints. Up till now, that was what physiotherapy had dealt with. Kinesiology brought the other concepts that we are also emotional beings, we're also nutritional, we're made up of minerals and vitamins and amino acids and proteins. And then we added to that a smaller triangle that fits into the bigger triangle, and that's our energy system. That's our life force, our spirit. So from that, the kinesiology allowed us to access all those levels, and suddenly we were able to treat people as a whole person. Two people could have the very same condition, the very same complaints or behavioral problems or behavioral intricacies or differences or gifts, and we could help them in different ways because each one of them would be accessed on a different level. Color is one of those levels. Color would fit into that energetic system, so the color would affect all the other three sides of the triangle, and the reason for that is color is in itself energy. What gives color its different color is that it is a wavelength, a different frequency of energy, and that's how we pick up color. Color is different because it is reflected in our retina by the rods and cones as a different energy. That energy is then passed on to the pituitary gland in the brain, and the pituitary gland in the brain basically controls the rest of our being, from glands and hormones to thoughts and emotions. So you can see that color is vitally important in our lives, in that we pick up color subtly throughout the day by the clothes we wear, the color of the rooms that we're in. That we're picking up is getting passed on to the pituitary gland, to the other areas of the brain, and from there it affects our whole life, the whole biochemical system of our body. It has been shown that different thoughts that we have release different neuropeptides that are picked up by different nerve cells. They also found that these neuropeptides were picked up on other organs in the body, and this can show us that emotions then affect our whole being. Now, if color affects our emotion, we can see how color is affecting our whole being. So specifically with an indigo child, they've come here with a specific color, with a specific message for us, but also with their own lessons that they need to learn, their own journey. And we can classify those journeys according to the different colors. The color that I'm talking about, you can imagine the aura comes with a specific color. That aura is a color because of the energy that it vibrates with. And we know that changes. We can see that in Kirlian photography. That's going to change from time to time according to a person's mood. But there's going to be a predominant color in someone's aura. That's what a lot of people call their soul color. For me, that's their issues. In homeopathy, they talk about a miasm. The lessons I've come to learn, the illnesses they're prone to. Call it whatever we like. That soul color is the color that these children have issues with. In other words, the emotional traits of that color are the emotional issues that they need to come here to learn to deal with. I'm always hesitant to describe a child as an indigo child, because you want to group them into a specific pattern, and they must behave in this way or in that way, or they must behave according to the color that some therapist has told them is their soul color, or the color that they've brought in. And I think on a day-to-day basis, and certainly throughout their lifetime, these colors change. They've got their lessons to learn, and we need to help them through those lessons. I don't think it's good enough to say your child's an indigo child, so let them run wild. What we need to do is be able to help them just as they're here to help us to grow in certain ways. We need to be able to know how we can help them. Indigo children, I think, are more and more commonly accepted. I think sometimes we call children indigo children as an excuse because we can't deal with their special needs and their special behavior. I think they've come here to push us to move on and to have a relook at our lives and what we feel is important. Kinesiology uses muscle testing to assess where there's an imbalance. Once we found the imbalance, we use the same muscle test to find out what is the most appropriate way to treat that, color being one of them. There are various different techniques, and I always think of kinesiology or a kinesiologist as the tip of the iceberg. Each kinesiologist then has their own tools underneath that they're going to use. So I just want to explain that kinesiology is a way of accessing your child's higher intellect or their higher self, their internal computer, whatever you want to call it. That doesn't really matter. Using kinesiology, we will be able to ask the child what's wrong with them and what's the best way to help them to just have an easier journey, to learn their lessons easier. So as I've explained, color is energy, and if we look at the model that we are energetic beings as well as structural, emotional and nutritional, then you can imagine that we would vibrate or give off a certain frequency or certain energy. That's what people who are gifted or who are sensitive enough call auras. They're able to see them, and these colors change from person to person. This is where the soul color comes in, and the color of the aura, that people have a specific color which has specific qualities, behavioral qualities, weaknesses, strengths. People have a soul color, but their aura color will change on a daily basis, on a hourly basis, as the different emotions fluctuate and change. So it's important not to classify someone only according to their soul color. Now, if you can imagine that we're energetic beings and we're vibrating in an energetic world where we've got energetic auras and colors, you can then see how powerful it would be to be in a room where you have a color that is detrimental to your energetic vibration or a color that's beneficial. Now, I've seen it where simply by painting a child's room a different color has changed their total personality, their behavioral patterns, purely because you're enhancing the qualities that they've got and you're taking away from qualities or weaknesses that they've got. To elaborate a little bit more on looking or helping a person on a holistic level, if you can imagine your child having a fall at school, that maybe they're pushed by a bully, pushes them down the stairs, and they arrive home with a bruised leg. So there's a physical complaint, and you end up putting ice on it and giving them arnica oil to rub in. So you're treating the physical side of it, but what we haven't accessed is the emotional side, the feeling of being victimized, the feeling of being bullied. And from that whole pattern we can see if there was a child at school that was regularly being bullied, well then that's going to be affecting how they absorb their food. That's going to maybe make them allergic to some kind of food that they're eating. Maybe the bully picks on them every lunchtime while they're having milk, then they become allergic to dairy. With kinesiology, then you can treat someone, for example, their bruised leg from the fall down the stairs. They come for a session, and what happens, we end up looking at emotion or energy to do with bullying or feeling like a victim, not being able to express themselves. On another level, we might have a child who is allergic to something that because they're allergic, it affects them on a structural level. Suddenly they're not able to function, not able to sit up and concentrate at school. With the kinesiology, we would then be able to access the fact that it's a nutritional problem. It's not a behavioral problem. A very common example of that is children that wet their beds when they shouldn't be anymore. There's a lot of proof that shows that wheat allergies cause children to wet their beds. Now, it's no good trying to address that on a behavioral side when it's actually a chemical, biochemical, nutritional allergy that's causing the child to wet their bed. Let's say the child starts wetting the bed, they no longer want to go and socialize, they don't want to sleep out at friends' houses. So you can see how the whole holistic concept goes far deeper than just what we're explaining even here today. It's just a glimpse again.
Eric Richardson is a curriculum developer, researcher and lecturer in educational studies at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. He is responsible for a number of philosophy and sociology courses offered to the student teachers and teachers who are upgrading their qualifications.
Okay, currently I'm actually a lecturer in the Educational Studies Department at Wits University, which positions me in a department which is very involved in philosophy and psychology, curriculum studies, history, and those kinds of courses which the student teachers are taught. And prior to becoming a lecturer, I was a high school teacher, and for the first 4 years of lecturing, I remained in the hostel at the school where I was a housemaster, and that's given me a lot of insight into what's going on amongst our teenage boys particularly. And at the same time, obviously I've been exposed to a lot of the contemporary research, debates and discussions within a university environment. And that's been exciting. It's been exciting working with the teenagers on the one hand, and then on the other hand, the student teachers, and more recently, teachers. All right, just to let you know a little bit about the subjects or the disciplines within educational studies where I am located. My focus is on philosophy of education and sociology of education. However, I'm also involved in the teaching of psychology of education. The advantage of being in educational studies is that we're not really concerned with teaching methods as such. We have a department of professional studies who focus on teaching methods. We are much more concerned with enabling our students to develop the ability to think critically about a lot of issues, a lot of concepts, a lot of theories. And generally speaking, we would look at what is going on within schools, within our educational system, from a particularly critical viewpoint. We would stop, we would look, we would reflect, and we would say, what are they doing right and what are they doing wrong? And a lot of our courses are designed in such a way that we're trying to compensate for what we perceive to be problems within our educational system. At the moment, I would suggest that student teachers aren't really thinking about our new generation of learners. In conversations with students, I've tried to get them to reflect on philosophers like Plato. And Plato says things like knowledge is innate, that we all have this ability to actually remember information or knowledge that we have learned in previous lives even. And I find that a lot of the student teachers are completely and utterly opposed to being exposed to these new kinds of ideas. But I think we have to persist in exposing them to these theories, perhaps, which are perceived to be very controversial. And when it comes to the new generation of children, or some might want to call them indigo children, I think it is important for student teachers to start thinking about those particular children. I wouldn't want to present indigo children as the truth. I wouldn't want to present the theory about indigo children as the truth. But I do think that as a philosopher of education, I would be failing in my job if I were not to expose my students to different ideas and different theories. And I would have no problem introducing them to the idea of the indigo child, or to the idea of the spiritual child, the psychic child, in the same way that we might want our student teachers to think about children with HIV/AIDS. We might want our student teachers to think about children who are suffering from some other kind of illness, perhaps malnourishment, whatever it is. In the same way that we want our student teachers to reflect on those children and their needs, then I think perhaps we need to consider that our students need to reflect on indigo children and their needs, and to start with the assumption that, well, they might really exist. What if there are children walking amongst us who are telepathic, who have these abilities that, are seen to be very spiritual, perhaps even psychic? What if they are in our schools at the moment? What happens if we are misdiagnosing them? What happens if we're just giving them Ritalin because we perceive them to be different? I think there's a problem if we're just going around with our eyes closed and not entertaining the thought that perhaps these children are real. Perhaps there are children amongst us who are quite spiritual, who are quite psychic, and if there are, surely we as teachers should be concerned with their needs. I think that very often teachers are very concerned with the curriculum, just with responding to the needs of the curriculum, teaching a particular subject, and forgetting that they're actually working with a human being. And within educational studies, we do teach the psychology of teaching and learning. And I think that that would be one area perhaps where we could consider the idea that there may be these children who are spiritual or psychic or somehow different in that way from other children, to look at their particular stages of development and to say, well, if they are in this particular stage, how do we as teachers respond to them? How do we respond to their needs? If we look at what the literature says on indigo children, we would find that the schools really currently are not optimally situated for indigo children at all. They are not designed to accommodate these children who are perceived to be very individualistic, perhaps rebellious, naughty, they don't want to sit down, they don't want to sit still. And I think that it takes a teacher with quite a bit of open-mindedness to stop and to say, well, maybe I can learn from these children. Maybe they've got a particular message that they have come to share with us. And as I said just now, I wouldn't want to teach that that is the truth. I don't think that we should replace one particular truth claim with another. But certainly as a philosopher of education, we could start asking important questions. At the moment, I would say that our student teachers are not really learning much about ADD, ADHD. They're not really being exposed to ways of coping with children who have ADD or ADHD, or helping those children to somehow cope, let alone develop, let alone actualize themselves, fulfill their potential and so forth. And I would suggest that that is probably an area within the teacher education curriculum where we definitely do need to start exploring the issue in a bit more depth.
Indigo children are right brain dominant and often struggle to fit into a left brain dominant world. We visited Dr. Annette Lotter, who has done significant research on right-left brain dominance, and she shed some light on how this affects one's behavior, as well as how to incorporate indigo children into the schooling environment.
I started off as a teacher in languages, an African language teacher, and Afrikaans, and after 7 years in teaching, I got a bit tired of that with all the restrictions and limitations of teaching. So I then moved on, and my first job at university was as a researcher in education. And during that time, I was fortunate to be involved in research regarding learning and why some students start their tertiary education with 6 distinctions and then they often fail at varsity, while other times we get learners with average marks at school that excel again at university. And this thing boggled us. Why does this happen? And with our research and investigations overseas and locally, we discovered that there's many children sitting in the school system with potential that don't excel. And this brought me into the whole research on brainedness, on handedness, on eye dominance, ear dominance, and all the stuff related to genetics and how people tick. So fortunately, because of the research we did a few years ago, I ended up with a whole practice nowadays where we already, if we can, at age 3, will take a child. We can do it younger. I can test a child at birth already and determine their genetic profile. It's a physical assessment where we determine, first of all, the brain dominance of the child, left or brain dominance. We also determine the hand dominance, which most people will know what it might be. We also determine the foot dominance, the eye and the ear dominance. Now, starting perhaps with the brain dominance. When we find children left brain dominant, the brain side dominant merely indicate to me what kind of environment will that child relax and function or excel in. And left brain children want a structured, predictable environment, and surely those kids then that are left brained fit very well into our school system, which is pretty well based on the British kind of education system. Our problem often happens with the right brain kids. What does their brain dominance tell us? That they like flexibility, challenge and change. So I call right brain children gypsies, because what I find, as soon as anything becomes predictable, they lose interest and they want change and challenge. And that starts to happen more or less at grade 5, where school becomes a bore. And these kids sit in school, it doesn't go fast enough for them, and they become labeled sometimes because of the problems in class, because they are merely bored with the school system. The Russians go overboard with the foot dominance, and they say if you've got a right foot dominant, it means that that foot again is working from the left side of the brain. We call it the structured foot, telling us you've got aptitude for structured sport like running, swimming, apparatus work perhaps in gymnastics. A left foot dominant, we call that the creative foot, working from the right side of the brain, imply that you've got the foot dominant that want to change direction all the time, meaning you'll be excellent in soccer, in dancing, in rugby. So that says a lot about the rugby players, I think. Let's talk about eye dominance. I believe that's crucial in the processing of the child in school and how they function on a perceptual level. Now, if I've got a right eye dominant, it means that eye is functioning from the left side of the brain. We call it the detail eye, telling us that child has got potential to see detail. What does it say for mathematics? We say children with right eyes are born with intelligence for maths. So if I assess them and I find they're not performing in the mathematics, I know they didn't see it. They need to see it to understand it. While left eye children, that eye is functioning from the right side of the brain. We call it the creative eye, and we say that children born with left eyes are born with an exquisite intelligence to visualize. And what do we call that in the school system? We call it daydreaming. So now I've got a problem. I might have a child with a right brain dominant that want to think creatively, that want to criticize, that want to analyze, interpret. And now, added to that, this child is perhaps born with the left eye as well, meaning he would rather visualize in class than listen to the teacher. And what do we do wrong? I was a teacher myself, as I said. And what do we say? We say to children, look at me, listen. And I haven't found in all the years of research the connection between the eye and the ear. Now these kids are sitting in class, looking at the teacher, trying to listen, and what will happen with these left eye children? They would start scanning all around the room. What can they wonder about? So they don't hear me. That's a big problem. And how do we actually develop the intelligence of visualization? I don't think much after grade 4 at all. So if these kids don't sit in class and wonder about things, they don't develop that potential at all. So that creates a big problem. And what do left eye children do as well? They reverse letters often. They don't like reading, because what does it mean if they read? Normally in our culture we read from left to right. And how would a left eye want to read? From right to left again, which creates a problem. So those eyes are tired of reading. Let's talk about ear dominance. My ear dominance will determine my interpersonal skill interacting with other people. Now, if I have a right ear dominant, it means that ear is functioning from the left side of the brain. We call it the detail ear or the impatient ear. Because right ear people, you need to talk them quickly and fast, or else they get bored merely. And what do? They interrupt you to help you finish their sentences. So often I suggest a career in law for them, where they get paid to interrupt people. Let's talk about the left ear children. Now I have a left ear child, meaning that that ear gets energy on the right side of the brain. We call it the creative ear. Creative ear children have got a wonderful intelligence for music. They hear tone and pitch perfectly. So who will I put in the choir, the left ear or the right ear? the left ear child, because they've got such a sensitive ear that they will hear everybody around them sing and they will adjust their voice that it sounds like one voice. A right ear person, I'll merely let them sing alone because their voices will tend to stand out in a choir. But what does it mean for left ear children? They are sensitive for sound. So when they interact with people, as soon as I talk at a louder tone of voice, they will think I'm cross at them. So I find that these left ear children go through the school system always thinking people are cross. I call them the gentleman ear children, because they always assist and help people that sound unhappy. So they're always doing everybody favors, helping and assisting. So it's important then that they end up in careers where they get paid to assist and help people. Let's look at a typical profile of a possible indigo child. I would say it's a right brain child, a fiddly right hand, a foot that wants to move all the time, definitely an impatient ear, and possibly a creative eye. It could be the right eye as well, but I think a lot of these kids have got left eye. So that's possibly a profile telling me this child has got wonderful talent to think creatively, to analyze, to interpret, to compare, and all of that. This child has got a hand. The hand dominance works from the left side of the brain, telling me this child will fiddle. He will investigate in class all the time. And the foot can't sit still. The foot will move because it's the foot working from that creative hemisphere again. This child has got the impatient ear. He hears quickly, that detail ear. And the creative eye. So what are we seeing? That the child is actually utilizing both hemispheres, but in class he will have a problem concentrating because of this visualization eye that's scanning all the time for information. So normally no problem when this child is relaxed to have access to both hemispheres. Now what happens in the brain when the child stresses, when those two synapses separate? There will be a problem first. That will happen in the non-dominant hemisphere, meaning the left side of the brain. And what does that mean now? The child hasn't got access to the hand and the ear in this case. He can't hear me, even if he wants to. I want to talk to this person, he can't interact with me. The hand dominance indicates he can't talk back to me. He can't communicate either verbally or in writing. So in exams, this child will physically write slower and not be able to finish his exam papers, for example. If it was a right eye as well, dominant, the child would lose access to the eye. He won't read his questions in the exam correctly. He will have a problem seeing detail as well. So what we start looking at is how many blockages. He has two blockages in stress. I sometimes find a child with a right brain, right foot, right ear, right hand and eye, that there's 4 blockages. So what will happen? What does these children need to do? How do they get access back in this non-dominant hemisphere to access the stuff that's switched off? They physically need to move. And what do we call that? Hyperactivity. What does all of this imply for the school system? I get typical common complaints daily that kids don't concentrate in class. Maybe that child has merely got a left eye, they don't know what to look for in class, they don't know what to focus on, so they're visualizing. Or maybe it's a child with a left ear, they don't listen unless I structure them clearly with a good objective of what to listen for. Or maybe this child is a bit dehydrated, or he's a bit agitated or frustrated, so the non-dominant side of the brain starts switching off, and that means the child needs to move now in class to access the non-dominant side of the brain again, and we call that hyperactivity or ADD. We often would, if there's a serious concern with ADD symptoms, we would analyze the blood type of the child to see what foodstuffs they might be allergic to, and there the mother's got a big responsibility, of course, to just manage that all the time. I've got a big worry that a lot of our kids sitting in school, and often our right brain children, normally they are not emotional at all, only in stress, because once they lose the functioning of the eye to see detail, once they can't hear perhaps, they will now start showing emotional symptoms of stress because they can't function, they can't see, they can't hear, they can't interact with people. Normally they're not like that. So the more we see these symptoms, the more it tells me that these kids are merely under stress. So therefore it's important that we do determine the genetic profile to see what the stress profile would look like. And I often find with these right brain children especially, that normally when they relax, they can see detail, they can hear detail, they can function okay, that they do excellently in tests in class. But now the exam comes and these kids stress, and then often I find that there's about a 30% difference in the exam mark. I give more letters of recommendation for right brain children to have extra time in school for exams than any other profile because of how badly they shut down in stress and lose functioning totally. We either see children at our practices individually on reference from schools where they often would suggest that the children come and see us to determine why they don't concentrate, why they don't finish tasks, or I often visit schools when they request me to do so, where we either assess children at the school to place them correctly in class, and to do the placement in class of where the child should physically sit. I look at the ear dominance because that tells me on what side of the child that the teacher should be standing while they explain, perhaps standing in front of the blackboard. A big passion of me at the moment is to do workshops with teachers where we do often a 3-hour workshop sensitizing them about the genetic profile of our children, why they function in the way they do, to help the teachers to understand these children better, to make their life easier. And it's astonishing that I find more and more schools where we've worked that the teachers would start using our Indigo children to assist other children in class that are not as fast as they might be. They're the fast learners, they're the high flyers in school often. And when we give them responsibility and not start labeling them as hyperactive, as difficult, as lazy, as all sorts of things, they start performing according to their real potential, which is wonderful and great to see. So there's improvement, and I've got hope that there might be big change in the near future.
There are various exercises we can do to help us with balancing the brain activity, as well as strengthening the coordination between the left and right hemispheres. Dr. Neil Rowley will show us or demonstrate to us some of these tools that we can use within our home. It is important for us to also remember that we are dealing with children and that this should be fun.
My personal feeling is that what we're seeing here is a possible jump in the evolutionary process whereby children seem to be coming through with a higher level of understanding in terms of their intuitional capacity or intuitional faculties as compared to what we may be exhibiting as an intellectual level, or as what many people may exhibit as a pure basic instinctual level. These three being the levels of consciousness that we all have within ourselves: the instinct, intellect, and intuition. In my opinion, it seems that these young children are exhibiting an extremely high level of intuition.
So a small home test that can be done just to apply or to investigate the possibility of this right-left brain dominance is a simple marching on the spot, where we find that when you are marching, you normally march with your right arm and your left leg. Generally what happens with right-left brain imbalances, we get a right arm, right leg marching together as opposed to the opposites. And this exact test is also a very simple exercise that can be used on a daily basis to help to bring about a balance between the left and the right hemispheres through practicing to march on the spot.
So what we would do is you would ask your child to march, and invariably they march like this and like this together. So a home technique would be to train them to march with the opposite sides like that, and to make it even more efficient, you switch your hand out like that. And that, repeated on a number of times during the day, will start to bring about a better balance between the connections of the left and the right brain. Another home exercise which you can do, and which is a lot of fun and also brings about a great balance between left and right brain, is the juggling balls. Okay, and what you do here is you again are concentrating on your left and your right arm moving synchronistically with interaction from your left and your right hemispheres of the brain. Okay, I'll demonstrate quickly what it looks like, and then we can go through a process of learning how to do that together. So it will be like this. And this causes us to use left and right motor skills, and we learn to balance our spheres in a better manner. How's that? I think that this is also an excellent opportunity for parent-child interaction, because most of you parents will not be able to do this, okay, and so can learn together with your children. And in this process you can just use apples or oranges. And the first step in the art of this is to use one, and to just get into a pattern of throwing the ball from one hand to the other. Because what happens here is that normally the one hand cannot operate as well as the other. So you need to get into a pattern of throwing the ball the right height and catching it, and just knowing that when you let it go, it's going to drop into your other hand. So you just practice that. And this is actually where the true art of juggling comes in, is to learn to balance and throw that single ball all the time, because this is what all it's going to be, is throwing that one ball up and catching it. Okay, then we're going to go to a second stage where we're going to try with two balls. And with this, we're going to throw one up, and at the midpoint of the ball, we're going to let the other ball go. So, like that. See? Midpoint. You see how I threw that one, huh? Midpoint. Midpoint. Just to get a nice pattern going. And you will see that my hand coordination is not as fabulous as it should be. Okay. And so now with three balls, and we're going to start with the two balls in your weak hand. And we're going to throw to the midpoint, and as it gets to the midpoint, we let go the next one. So there we go. Now I'm making it look very easy. That's not that easy. You get a lot of practice, so good luck. So here's another tool, which is called POI, P-O-I. And with this tool, we attach them to our fingers, like this, to both hands. And we use these by swinging our arms around and starting to get a nice balance going between the left and the right hemispheres. Fortunately, we can't do this inside, so we're going to do this outside to give a demonstration. So the last tool that I have to share with you is called a labyrinth, and this is a geometrical pattern that is carved into wood. It comes from an ancient Greek design from sacred geometry, and what you do is, with your eyes closed, you follow the pattern in the wood. And as we're doing this, it begins a process of rewiring the neural connections between the left and the right hemispheres. Like that. I would like to add that all of these that we've done, the poi, the labyrinth, the juggling, and the marching, are as good for you, the parent, as it is for your child.
We are seldom aware of the full impact of different foods on our well-being. Now, through the challenges of her son's autism, Jenny Buckle has become a leader in autistic spectrum disorder. She also shares with us the astounding role nutrition has on our lives.
My journey with autism and with my children has really helped me help families who are not sure what's wrong with their children. Many children come to me with 3 different diagnoses, and the experience with the diet that I've got and the nutritional intervention that I've done, many of them are willing to implement that. They're willing to try anything to help their child. And nutritionally, removing certain foodstuffs from some of the children that don't have a typical autistic spectrum disorder has also had a profound impact on their functioning. There are many children that I see that are not necessarily an autistic spectrum child, but you're seeing the same deficits. You're seeing an inability to cope with the pressures, an inability to cope with social pressure, an inability to cope with homework. So my suggestion to people would be to cut out all the food that you buy that's pre-prepared. So a typical diet for a child that would go on the diet through me would be they can eat any type of protein, so red meat, chicken, fish. I include some starches like potatoes and rice, vegetables and fruits. And if you could have them on that type of diet, which is healthier than most kids are eating, to be very honest with you, and start reintroducing after 4 weeks some of these products, you will see an incredible reaction to the food that they're really intolerant to. You see, with autistic spectrum disorders, or with many of the children I work with, the reaction is immediate. With Dylan, my oldest son, it's not immediate. It builds up in his system. And all of a sudden we have, after a week or 2, constipation issues, concentration issues, lethargy. I have no energy. Almost negative processes, negative thought processes that start happening. But because it's not immediate, it's so gradual, you're reluctant to actually say, well, this is having a profound impact on my child. I think the important thing with children who are, for my triplets, their lives depend on their diet. For Dylan, his life doesn't depend on the diet. But if I can get him to see how it makes him feel and get him to take ownership of the fact that it really is bad for him, I think we as a family would make a complete shift, a lifestyle shift, to exclude those products. And I'm not saying that the odd birthday party, he can't have those products. But if you could cut them out of the diet on a regular basis, your child eats what's in your home most of the time.
Juliet Burns from the NutriBalance Centre in Johannesburg shares the importance of reducing our intake of pollutants such as colorants, flavorants and preservatives by eating whole foods and cutting out refined processed food products. She also compiled the Guide to Holistic Eating provided with this tape.
As a health advisor working with the public in shops and seeing numerous mums, dads, children every day of my life, I would like to now discuss briefly with you the issue of ADD, ADHD in relation to diet, and also to say that in terms of the Indigo child, which is not my field, but I've done enough research on it to know that it is not a specifically ADD syndrome. In other words, Indigo doesn't mean ADD, ADD doesn't mean indigo. I think the correlation there is, for me, a social issue, and that's the issue I want to talk to you about, which is food. We live in an extremely toxic environment. Your food and your water today is anything but clean. It's anything but giving you the nutrients and the minerals and all the wonderful aminos and phytonutrients that bodies use to live, to create cells, to build your immunity, and just to function. ADD, as you know, is a brain dysfunction. When I say that, it's a, I believe, a brain nutritional dysfunction. Why? Because every cell in your body needs nutrition. There are very, very specific and very wonderful natural nutritional foods. We call them neuronutrients. And ADD children, whether they're babies or they've developed into teenagers and adolescents, are no different. So I'll go back to what most moms say to me, oh, this sounds all very wonderful, but where do I shop? What do I do? My child goes to school and there's peer pressure, there's a tuck shop. What am I supposed to do? And I always say to them, it is difficult, and if I was a mom with young children today, one of my first group efforts would be to go to the school, talk to the headmistress, or form a little committee together with the tuck shop people, who I know are often moms themselves, and actually start being proactive about changing things. Because what I'm getting as a health advisor is almost that the tail is wagging the dog. The child wants this, the school wants that, and everybody's saying, oh gosh, yes, it's not going to work. As a parent, you have to become proactively responsible. Having said all that, it's not easy. You walk into your local shop to do your weekly whatever. You've got 3 or 4 children to worry about, all wanting different things. Your husband's on this diet, the teenage daughter's on that diet, and somebody else is allergic to this and someone else is not wanting that. All I can say to you is go back to essence. Instead of going to the quickest source, go to your greengrocer. Think about what you can cook, what you can juice, what you can produce that is non-toxic and full of enzymes and full of nutrition for your family.
I hope that you have found the information shared by our guest speakers informative and interesting, and that this information will encourage you to embark on your own journey of research. The subject is vast. There is a vast amount of information available to us, and this information can be explored from many different points of view. And purely based on that, what works for me sometimes may not work for you. And my aim at the onset of this videotape was to play a supportive and encouraging role only. My website provides general questions and answers, as well as book reviews and more articles from the specialists in their particular fields. During my period of research, the most common challenge encountered by both parents and children is the inability to fit into the educational system. The most painful situation for any parent is to see the brilliance within one's own child at home, but to witness then the inadequacies, self-doubt and fear that sets in the moment the child leaves the home environment into any stressful situation. Fathers specifically are uncomfortable with or embarrassed by a son's inability to be in control of his emotions or inadequacies. And this often results in the mother being the mediator between the men in her life, causing further relationship problems. Hopefully, the stresses the new generation encounters will force us to move out of our comfort zones, searching for alternative solutions to their behavioral problems, food intolerances, and learning difficulties. We are all becoming aware of the fact that we are composed of body, mind, and spirit, And should we strive to be balanced as human beings, we have to take all three into consideration. The Indigo children may help us to move from an era that was ruled by the body and mind into a new era where we can acknowledge the importance of the S factor within all of us. We can no longer ignore the importance of the spirit.
I know you're out there. I can feel you there. I came here to show you how it's gonna be. Our world is changing. Let me be me. I am gonna show you a world where we all free, free, freedom. Can't you see that you are you and I am me? Oh, can't you see?